Perfect. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay, I'll
Go
call
ahead,
the
John.
meeting to order. Um, this is a meeting of the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, in case anybody's in the wrong place. And I welcome you to the meeting, and then Taylor's going to welcome you also.
Yes. Welcome to the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission meeting. I'm Taylor Larson. I'm the coordinator for the program and happy to be here with you all. I think what we'll do, because we do have three new commissioners, is let's go around and do a round of introductions so folks can get familiar with who's with them on the commission before we dive into the content of the meeting. So, Doug, you want me to facilitate introductions? Would that
I do want you to do that because I don't have the list.
Great. Okay. Well, like I said, Taylor Larson, coordinator for the program. I'll start with Amanda.
Good afternoon, Amanda Lowe. I'm OWEB appointed tribal representative on the commission.
Thanks, Amanda. Doug.
I'm Doug Kramer. I've been appointed by ODA, and I'm the chairman at this point.
Thank you. And Doug will be facilitating most of the meeting. So thanks, Doug. Let's see, Mark Labhart.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Labhart. I'm the non-voting member representing the OWEB board, and then I also, on the OWEB board, I represent the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission.
Thank you for all the hats you wear, Mark. Ed.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Ed Contreras, Commissioner representing Fish and Wildlife.
Thanks, Ed. Nancy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Duncrack, a commissioner representing the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Thank you, Nancy. Dan.
Hey everyone, I'm Dan Bigelow, representing Oregon State Extension.
Appreciate you being here, Dan. Laura.
Hey everyone, Laura Masterson. I was appointed by the ODA board, organic vegetable farmer in the Willamette Valley. Looking forward to meeting our new commissioners.
Great. Tia. Thank you, Laura. So yeah, now I'm going to move to our three new commissioners. So if you want to spend a little more time giving us a brief introduction to who you are and what piqued your interest in joining the commission, feel free to spend a few seconds talking about that. So I'll start with John because you're not on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. John O'Keefe, Department Ag appointee. I was around when this program was kind of put together. I was with the cattlemen, president of the cattlemen then, and I've always felt this was a great program. I was glad to get a chance to support it. I ranch in Eastern Oregon, got a cattle ranch in Lake County. We've got range on the forest, and we've got range on the desert, and run cattle in the forest and desert and irrigated pasture, and been active in all this stuff, and tried to be supportive of the Ag Heritage program. The easements and the tools they bring are important for us to go forward doing conservation and keeping these historic family ranches on the land. I'll stop there and I'll go to mute and turn off my.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, John. We're really excited to have you joining us. Oh, did I skipped Sarah? Sarah's kind of new. So Sarah, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Evans Peters, and I'm representing Natural Resources. This is my first official meeting. I am with Pacific Birds Habitat Joint Venture and worked for many years, probably 15, with Bruce Taylor. So I've been following the program development and its course for a long time.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks for being here. Jan. Oh, Jan, you're on mute.
Good afternoon. I was appointed by the Oregon Department of Agriculture to fill the water quality spot. I'm currently president of the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts and their former executive director, and a board member of Clackamas Soil and Water District for 16 years, Working Lands Committee Chair, and both of these positions have enabled me to do some work with water quality. And like John, I was involved in 2017 in pushing for this program at the legislature and am so pleased to see it progressing. I'm a member of the Oregon Water Resources Commission and a former OWEB board member and a former Oregon legislator, but I've spent about 30 years now working on water policy from different perspectives. So that's what I bring to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And Mark Vargas.
Hi, yeah, Mark Vargas. Can you hear me okay, Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Yeah, I was appointed by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to be one of the Fish and Wildlife representatives for the commission here. My history goes back quite a ways with ODFW. I worked 37 years with the agency, retired about a year and a half ago. I've had various roles throughout the state, including I worked on the fish side and the wildlife side throughout my career. And I was on the Access and Habitat Southwest Council for a while before I became the district wildlife biologist down here in Medford. Jackson, Josephine, and Curry County is where I worked the last 25 years of my career. We have a small farm down here. We have sheep and a little bit of hay. And, since I retired, I've involved in a few other committees. I'm a board of director on the Watchable Wildlife Foundation, which is a grassroots effort down here. And a few other committees throughout my career I've been on. And, I'm retired, but yet I always have my fingers in on what's going on. Mark Labhart is one of Fish and Wildlife commissioners, and I'm every commission meeting I still log into the commission meeting and watch it on YouTube. So I haven't let go yet. So that's why I'm here. I just wanted to stay involved and contribute what I can. So looking forward to serving here. It's going to be fun.
Great. Well, what a fantastic group we have. Thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. With that, quickly, we'll run through OWEB staff. So Teresa, you want to go real quick?
Sure, I just lost internet a little bit, but Teresa DeBartoleben, I'm the drought program specialist at OWEB, and I'm here to support Taylor and Robin and take notes.
Great. Robin.
Hi, everyone. Robin Meacher. I'm the conservation easement specialist in the program.
Thanks, Robin. Ellen.
Hi, everybody. Ellen Ingemels. I'm grant support specialist with OWEB, and I am here for your tech support today.
Also does a lot of legwork organizing these meetings, so thank you, Ellen. And then Renee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Renee Davis, Acquisitions and Special Programs Manager at OWEB. I'm recovering from the flu, so I may turn off my camera here and there, but thanks to all the commissioners for being here, and welcome to the 4 new commissioners. Sarah, I know you have a little bit more tenure than the other few, but it's great to have all of you on board. So thanks for joining the commission. Thanks, Taylor.
And then we have 2 special guests who will be presenting a little bit later on, so they can introduce themselves more fully then, but real quick, we'll have Eric, you can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eric Mogenberg. I am the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program Manager for NRCS Oregon.
Really happy to have you here, Eric. And then Matt.
Hi, everybody. Matt Murphy. I'm the Agricultural Land Easement Program Coordinator, working with Eric at NRCS.
Great. Okay. Well, look at that. We are right on time according to our agenda. It's like we planned it that way. Good job, Doug. So with that, looks like, Ellen, do we have any public comment?
We had no public comment come in, but we do have 2 attendees. So Andrea or Lynn, if you were hoping to give public comment, you can raise your hand. See none.
That's how we go through agendas quickly. The next item on our agenda is the review and approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody have questions on those minutes? Comments on those minutes? If there is none, I would entertain a motion for approval.
I move to approve the minutes for the November 7th, 2024 meeting as presented.
Second.
Who was that, Amanda?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? There is none, so we will approve the minutes as presented. Okay, we're to vice chair elections. As most of you know, Bruce was I always called him co-chair. I guess he called himself vice chair. We can call him whatever we want. We need to replace him, and it's Bruce and I have been the only 2 officers of this organization since we organized ourselves, so I'm not sure there's any precedences necessarily, but I know Bruce and I always felt really good about the fact that we could keep one of these officer slots for agriculture and another officer slot for kind of an environmental person. And so with that being said, because of the way the ethics rules read nowadays, none of us have got a chance to discuss how we should do this. So I'm going to maybe try and coach you a little bit, and that is we're going to need nominations from the floor. If we only have 1 nomination, we'll probably look for a motion for approval by a voice vote. If there's more than 1 nomination, we'll have to do it a different way. So, with that being said, does anybody have any nominations for vice chair or co-chair?
Doug, I see a hand that Jan has up.
I can't see it, so thank you.
Sorry. I was going to nominate Sarah.
Okay. Sarah is nominated. Is there a second for Sarah, by the way?
This is Laura. I'll second.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay.
Sarah, are you willing to accept the nomination? Yeah.
Yes, I would happily accept.
Terrific.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any other nominations from the floor? I'm going to give it a minute or 2 here, so you guys think about it. I don't want to make this look like it was a rush job.
Doug, this is Laura. I was just gonna ask, since we, when for Board of Ag, we always had a nominating committee. I understand we can't really do that anymore. So I just wanted to ask or encourage people to self-nominate. I know that can feel a little bit weird, but sometimes that's helpful to just throw your own hat in the ring. And I was going to give you a little bit of a hard time because which category do I fit in of your two categories?
Laura, you fit all the categories. You always have. But I would still put you on the ag side if it was me. But everybody can have their own opinion. So. Okay. I don't hear any other nominations. Does anybody want to make a motion to cast a unanimous ballot?
So moved, John O'Keefe.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second, Jan.
Seconded by Jan Lee. It's been moved and seconded that, and I didn't write your name down, Sarah. Sarah has been nominated for vice chair, co-chair. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Is anybody abstaining? Okay, Sarah, thank you for allowing us to do this, and I look forward to working with you.
It was a quick welcome. Thank you, Doug.
I hope to get to know you a little better. Bruce and I got to know each other really well and got along with him great, so I don't see a problem. Taylor, program updates.
Great. Okay. Well, a fair amount has happened since we last got together. And so I'm just going to give kind of a quick update to the commission. I mean, most of it is in staff report, item D on page 11 of your ebook. But if folks have questions about any one of the items, we can just pause at that item and then talk through any questions we have. So first thing that happened is the board awarded the conservation easement grant awards that the commission recommended at their November meeting. So $5,081,036 was awarded to 5 grants as shown in item D, and that reflects the commission's recommendation that went to the board. So no real surprises there. I'm not sure if folks have any questions on those, but right now we're currently working on getting into grant agreement for those awards. So stay tuned on that front. Exciting times. The other thing you'll be happy to know is that the administrative rules we've been working on for the past, what feels like a decade, but only maybe 6 months, were adopted by the board as well. So in the staff report, I provided a link to those updated rules. We're really excited to have those updated rules. I think it's going to help the program run a little bit smoother. And I, as tedious as it was at times, I do think it was useful for all of us to spend some time with those rules, because that's really what drives the decision space that we have here as a program and as a commission. So really appreciate everybody's legwork on that front. I am very excited to have done it and also not to have to do it for quite some time. So thank you all for that. The other thing we already kind of addressed, but so in addition to Sarah being appointed to the commission at the previous board meeting, at the January board meeting, the OWEB board appointed 3 new commissioners who just introduced themselves. So welcome Jan and Mark and John. really excited to have folks joining the commission. Quite a bit of turnover at this point in time, but the program's been around long enough that people are terming out. So I think we got some really great replacements, and our next person who to be terming out, I think, is Doug at the end of this year. So, if you have ideas for folks, start planting the seed and spreading the word, because we'll be recruiting for that position before we know it. Okay, so let's see. The next update we have is we've opened a grant solicitation for the Conservation Management Planning Program. So if you all remember, this is utilizing funds that came to the program through the Natural and Working Lands Funds. So we have $750,000 available for that solicitation. It opened at the beginning of February and closes on April 1st. And so we've been working on doing some outreach for that. We've hosted an informational webinar. We'll be, I think, going to an OAHC webinar I think it's next week, right, Jan? I'll have to look at my calendar. And doing pre-application consultations with folks who are interested. And yeah, really excited to finally be launching this program in this fully fleshed out form. So stay tuned. We're aiming at July board awards. So at our June commission meeting, we will most likely be asking for your funding recommendations on the CMP awards. And so, yeah, with that, I think I was going to have Renee, if you're willing, give a brief legislative update. There's a few balls in the air regarding future funding for the program that Renee is going to touch on.
Yep, thanks, Taylor. So the staff report mentions House Bill 3131, which is a fairly succinct and straightforward bill, proposes to allocate $17.3 million in general fund, and that would be deposited into the Treasury account specifically for Oregon Ag Heritage Program. We have a standalone fund for the program. So the House Ag Committee had kind of a split set of hearings just because their agendas are so full. So had a public hearing on the 22nd and then the 27th of January, and then a work session on the 12th of February, and passed out of the policy committee, and now has a referral to Ways and Means. So within the bill, it would allocate over $15 million to grants and approximately $2 million for operations. So combination of staff, supplies and services, Department of Justice, due diligence costs. And so the costs included in the bill are focused on the 2025-2027 biennium, given the general fund request. Not at this point proposing to make it permanent, but re-upping funding for another biennium. So we'll continue to watch the bill closely, keeping you all updated about that. But would just flag that we have had some very engaged proponents for the program who have been reaching out to legislators, provided great public comment during the public hearing. So know that there are folks who are speaking to legislators in strong support of the program. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Well, are you done, Renee, on that? I'd just like to say that I've been watching some of the legislative hearings on this, and if they're, sometimes the legislatures, not everybody's bipartisan, and this bill, his 3131, is like everybody is very, very supportive of it across the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats and independents and all. And so you are well thought of. And so, of course, as Renee says, it's got to get to Ways and Means, but it's nice to see such broad support for this program across pretty much all the legislators that are been involved in and care about it. So it's really good news from my perspective.
Thanks, Mark. Do other folks have questions about the House bill or comments? Okay, Taylor, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, and I think I will immediately kick it over to Robin to talk about some potential refinements for a potential future conservation easement solicitation. So go for it, Robin.
So it's great that Renee set up kind of the funding scenario, because this is talking about refinements that we would make if we have a solicitation this year, but also just a recognition of just ongoing improvements and kind of the work that we do even when there's not an active solicitation going. And I'll focus on more kind of process, because we aren't bringing to you any proposed or kind of concrete changes to anything at this point, but we are focusing in on right now more of our gathering feedback, and I use the term audit in the staff report, so I'll just stick with that, of auditing information that we've collected over time, just to kind of reground ourselves in the 2 cycles that we've been able to do with the conservation easement offering. The differences there, the kind of differences in application that we received, the differences in how our reviewers received those, and then the comments that we heard from the commission as well in November when the decisions were in front of you on the different grants. So have been taking that feedback, what we've been hearing, kind of putting those 2 into what we've heard primarily is these 2 areas of the application format and then the technical review process. And so for both of those, we've also wanted to make sure that we're getting feedback from those that participate on our technical review team, given that they are kind of in many ways the meat of where this all comes together for us as we're doing it. So we did do a survey both to our review team members and then a different survey to the applicants that we had in the last cycle. They had different questions, but similar themes, looking at the type of information requested in the application, both in terms of application questions and then additional kind of application uploads and that, and asking about not just what we requested, but how we requested it, how that works from an applicant's perspective of being able to tell the story of their project, and how it works from a reviewer's perspective of having the responsibility of taking that story and matching it to the criteria. So we're working through those themes that are emerging from there. And then we, in the technical review process, similar vein of just kind of getting a sense from the applicant, how they might look at a revised process in review from a fairness perspective, recognizing the limitations we have with reviewers and how we can kind of facilitate a fair review process from the technical review, mainly in the context of like site visits and engagement with reviewers, which is what we've heard from our applicants. And that is a area that they both are interested in, but also maybe a little wary of, just recognizing statewide and the challenges that can happen with potential limited participation across the different projects. So that's been a really valuable conversation to have with the applicants. And then from the review team's perspective as well, in some ways aligning on those, but maybe for different reasons. Our reviewers are agency staff for the most part, and they come with their own limitations in funding and availability and ability to participate kind of beyond the virtual world. So that's definitely something we're looking at and how we can kind of work between those 2 spaces of helping find a engagement process with the review team that's fair, but also gives our reviewers a space to do the kind of hard conversations around and deep look into the applications in a way that gives them a little bit of anonymity as well. So happy to answer any questions on that process. And then also, we did hear the request from you all at the end of the commission meeting. So if there's any additional spaces here that you want us to kind of be thinking of as we're gathering feedback in these multiple areas.
So I see Ed has his hand up, and then Amanda.
Yeah, hey Robin. I was just curious, would the commission get a chance to see a summary of those changes before they're implemented? or would they just go right to the next solicitation?
Yeah, so our goal is to, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this during the work plan, is that the way we have kind of our calendar flowing or proposed calendar, there would be an opportunity to talk through some of those changes that we're planning to put into practice in June, I think it is. But we're not anticipating doing what we did in the past where we had a whole kind of like working committee type thing again. This would be more of just a commission conversation that we would come to you with what we've closer to the end product than the ground.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Amanda.
I was wondering, with the new rules that were adopted that we worked so long and hard on, hooray, and the inclusion of that climate related criteria section that was added in for all of these programs, if there would be adjustments to the members of the technical review team to add a reviewer specifically for things like local communities disproportionately affected by climate change, since that is one of the new criteria for all of the projects. And I don't know if right now is where you're looking at that in this process, but I did want to ask if it'll be considered in the future at some point.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I might punt to Renee to talk about how other programs have done that. But I think as we again, we are going to continue, I think, to be building our technical review team to the extent, like, we want to make sure the appropriate expertise is there to work with the criteria. And we've been really lucky to have a couple repeat folks so far on our technical review team, but we know that there's opportunity to add more, to have more of our topics kind of more completely added. So I think we'll continue to, as we're working to someday hopefully get a constant roster, we'll have opportunity to work through to make sure we're getting all that. But I think it's a great question, since the climate criteria is new across all of OWEB programs, and how that's functioned in other programs, if we have time.
Yeah, I would just follow up. Robin's exactly right. And I think, Amanda, we absolutely will kind of harvest learnings from technical review teams and how those have been kind of refined or reconsidered since the adoption of those climate criteria within, for example, our open solicitation programs. I think the point about composition, and I actually would use tribes as an example. We have tribal representatives who are members of various regional review teams or technical review teams for our focused investment partnerships as an example. And so I think certainly there are folks that may already be sitting on teams, that some of those review teams who are able to bring some focus on the climate related criteria. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn from some of the other teams' composition and talk through where do we already have some of that existing expertise around some aspects of climate, and where might we need to grow that. And if any of you have suggestions, I mean, we have some lead time between now and June, but if you have suggestions, happy to hear those. Just please feel free to reach out to staff, and then in June we'll bring back some of what we've learned from the other programs.
Thank you both.
Doug, is that a question?
Yeah.
A hand raise?
Yeah.
A real hand raise, not a virtual hand raise.
I'm not sure how to do that, but anyways, just wondered if you could give us a short update on where the projects are from the first solicitation. I know we had an update there in November, and was hoping you could give us another one.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. I'm gonna make one quick wrap up request to this one, though, is we will not be giving you all the burden of being given a survey for your thoughts and opinions on the process. But prior to June, as we're working this up, you all have, I think, the ultimate role in making the decisions around these applications. So we would very much, if you've got additional feedback that you want to provide off of last cycle or the cycle before, please feel free to send that to us as staff, and we'll work through that as well as we're kind of putting all this together. And so is now a good time, Taylor, to do an update on them? Or
Yeah, I think
okay.
We're running a little ahead of schedule.
Okay, great.
Taylor, I just have a quick question for Robin. This is Laura. I appreciate not asking us to fill out the survey. But would it be possible for you to share a copy of the survey with us?
Yeah, we can share the questions that we asked. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so update on the projects. We had our first closed easement last week, the 13th. So OAHP has an easement under its, so that's great. There'll be a press release that the grantee will be doing in March, I think it's on their calendar for that. So that's great. Willamette Valley property, Hagen Farms, if you remember that one, that was actually a project where the landowners had already done an easement that covered part of their riparian area, and they wanted to have additional acres protected that covered the rest of their farm. So that was about, I think, 154 acres of protection in the Willamette Valley. So that's great. That's, I think, the most fun update to give that we have one in the portfolio now. We have quite a few. One that is on its way with a hope of closing in May. Most due diligence has been finalized on that one. They're working through a survey, kind of wrapping up their legal description for their easement area. And then, of course, the work with the match partners of just making sure that we're coordinating funds at closing. So that may be our next one that we see come through. And then you'll see later on in the agenda, we have two others that have made substantial progress, but projects always run into minor hiccups. And so we've got two extension requests for some projects that have identified just syncing of deadlines with their match funder, and also just the complications sometimes that come along with easement negotiations and getting to that final document. So let's see, I think once out of this, yeah, I think that covers all the ones in the open docket. And then if there's any specific questions, I can answer them somewhat specifically. Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, aren't we, Taylor?
I think so.
I like moving along quickly. Oregon Agricultural Heritage Commission's work schedule for 2025.
Yeah, so this item, page 14 of your ebook, is an attempt to provide us and the greater community interested in this program with a little bit more of a rhythm to how we do our work. We've been pretty busy over the past year, and I think given rulemaking and just aligning the timing of funding coming into the program with the need for commission action, it's been kind of one meeting at a time. And as program coordinator, I thought it would be nice to be able to look out 2 or 3 or even 4 meetings ahead so that we can all get it on our calendar and kind of plan for making the time and mental space to have these meetings. So what you see in item E is a proposed meeting schedule for 2025 and into early 2026. I know, John, you probably can't see, but I'll go ahead and just share my screen so that we can have that up here. Can folks see the staff report? Great. Okay, so you'll see here February 21st, 2025. We're having that meeting right now as an informational meeting for the most part. And then looking at our next meeting potentially being June 5th. where we'll need to make those conservation management plan grant funding recommendations to the OWEB board. So that'll be the big action item needed. And then at this meeting, we're trying to tee up some potential conversations and thoughts around program refinements, and then we can use that June 5th meeting as an opportunity to do a deep dive into what some of those refinements are and make sure that the commission is getting to weigh in on those and clear on what those refinements are likely going to be. And then turning around and hoping to have a meeting in early August. So pending funding and the outcome of the legislative session, if there's new funding that is made available to the program, the commission will need to adopt a spending plan. And at that meeting, we would, assuming the commission wanted to invest in the conservation easement program, we would preview that solicitation launch. And then as part of the spending plan discussion, discuss what, if any, of the other grant program cycles the commission would be interested in opening at that point in time or over the coming year. So that would be kind of a big sort of intention setting meeting. And then we would likely run any of the solicitations that the commission included in their spending plan, and then need to come back together as a commission in February to make the funding awards for the conservation easement program if it were run, and any other grant programs that were run on that same timeline. So we usually try and aim to have at least one of these commission meetings in person. And historically, the meeting that we've done in person has been where we make the conservation easement funding awards. So given this timeline, our next in-person meeting would not be until February 5th, 2026. So I guess a couple of things for discussions. So we're not going to take a motion on this. This is me kind of taking your temperature on this approach and getting any feedback or thoughts, and then we can schedule accordingly. So this isn't necessarily set in stone at this point in time, but just want kind of your thoughts on the rhythm and the in-person versus virtual. And, if we are trying to have an in-person meeting for the CE funding awards, how folks kind of feel about doing that in February, given the potential for weather issues. So with that, Doug, I'll turn it to you to see if there's questions, and would it be helpful if I left this up for folks to look at as we discuss, or should I stop my screen share?
I think it's helpful to leave it up, but that's my opinion. So, I appreciate you putting this together, and I think it looks like a good schedule. Would you still plan on sending out a survey to make sure we're all available on those different dates? Or
I can certainly do that. Yeah.
Yeah, this far ahead, I don't think I see any issues on my end, but you never know what might come up as we get closer to the time and so on and so forth. So anybody else got comments?
I do see Laura has her hand up.
Okay.
I wanted to appreciate the advanced planning too, Taylor. Thank you. And I do have a potential conflict on Thursdays, and I saw they're all on Thursdays. So I just wanted to maybe advocate for, like, if we're talking sort of in general, that's great. And Wednesday or Friday would be great. Or a doodle like Doug was suggesting to get the actual meeting date.
Okay.
But thank you for the advanced planning. I certainly appreciate that.
And Laura, I thought you worked every day, not just on Thursdays.
Farming is every day. It's true. It's only when I have to go to work for someone else that I block it out.
Okay.
Could I just raise one point? Sorry, this is Dan.
Yeah.
So I am totally fine any day of the week besides in winter term, which runs from, mid-January through the end of March when I teach, and my class is normally on Mondays and Wednesdays. So Thursday or Friday. I know Laura said Friday is better for her. If we could, that February 2026 meeting, if that could be on a Friday, that might be best, if possible.
Okay. Yeah, this is super helpful.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Okay, so I'll go ahead then, Doug, and put together a doodle for the year and get folks, we'll nail down some exact dates and we can get those on the calendar well ahead of the actual meeting date.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to working lands, conservation easements. We need to do a timeline extension, it sounds like, for more than just 2 projects, but 2 projects plus all the current ones, is that?
Nope, we're just looking at the 2 projects in the staff report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I think everybody was sent a proposed motion if somebody wants to make that.
Would it be helpful if Robin ran through real quick what the extensions
Absolutely.
are?
Sure. Okay. So we have 2 grants that have requested extensions. They're with the same grantee, so that's why they're kind of like lumped together. And they are both in the same kind of cohort. So these were 2 projects, the Aspen Valley Ranch Rim Tract, and then Pitchfork T, which were extended in that batch extension that we did last year to have a closing date of July 28th, 2025. In conversations with the applicant and just kind of the looking at their calendar for the year and syncing up where they think they'll be between their NRCS funding and then also just like the timeline it takes for an OWEB extension request, given that we have to do a commission conversation potentially, and then that goes to the board later. It seemed most appropriate to just get from their perspective to ask for the extension now and align it with their NRCS grant, and then they could move forward with the confidence that they were looking toward the same timeline with those and could sync that up with NRCS expectations as well. So that was their rationale for requesting the extension. We've been working with them. They've produced multiple due diligence items that have been reviewed by staff, some by contractors. So they've made quite a bit of progress on both projects. So we are recommending as staff that you all as the commission recommend that we can recommend to the OWEB board that the extension be go forward.
Okay, thank you. So can anybody propose a motion, please?
I can propose a motion. I propose that we recommend to the OWEB board that they extend the grant deadline to March 31st, 2026 for the Aspen Valley Ranch Rim Tract and Pitchfork T. And I'll save you from reading the grant number with all other conditions and requirements remaining unchanged.
Thank you, Ed. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on the issue? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. And is there anybody abstaining? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Taylor, back to you. I think we're to item G.
Item G, yes, last item of the day, and we're running ahead of schedule, so it's great. I'll leave more time for discussion and questions at the end. So today, yeah, we are joined by Eric Mogenberg and Matt Penberthy. So Eric is, as he said at the top, well, I'll get his job title wrong, so he can tell us again, but he's a program specialist at NRCS or something like that. And Matt Penberthy is the Agricultural Land Easement Program Coordinator at the Coalition Oregon Land Trusts, and from my understanding is somehow a joint employee with NRCS. But again, I can let them explain how that works exactly. So just a brief tee up before I turn it over to Eric and Matt. So the NRCS ACEP ALE program continues to be the largest source of match funding for our conservation easement projects. And so Eric and Matt are going to be walking the commission through sort of the ACEP ALE application materials, ranking criteria, and just like general program process and timeline to tee up future conversations around program refinements and the OAHP side of things, so that we can continue to try and improve programmatic alignment where possible. So just we do also recognize that there's probably a little bit of uncertainty about future with the program, so we really want to keep this conversation focused on the functionality of the ACEP ALE program, and not, let's not try and dive into too much speculation around what may or may not happen as things move forward in time. But we're just trying to really root ourselves in how the program works now, so that we can improve our programmatic alignment to the degree possible in a potential future solicitation. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric, and you can take it away.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, exactly. Robin and Taylor thought it'd be a good idea for us to give an overview of the ag land easements, especially for the new commissioners, and how our process, how our parcels, how we get the applications and move through the process, and then they become Oregon Ag Heritage projects. So I think Matt is going to share his screen. We have a PowerPoint set up, and Matt is our partner position. So that is how we work with Matt. So yeah, and I manage the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program at the state office. I have 4 different programs under that umbrella, and that's the Ag Land Easement Program, the Wetland Reserve Easement Program. Those are currently both funded under the current 18 Farm Bill. And then I have 2 others, the Healthy Forest Reserve Program and the Emergency Watershed Reserve Program. And those are currently not funded, but we still have easements in the state that we're responsible for and I manage. So, all right, next slide. Matt, there he is. So yeah, we're going to cover an overview of the eligibility, the application materials that we use, our ranking process, and our application timeline. So next slide. So a brief overview of the program. A delay?
Yeah, it seems like there's a slight delay. So just FYI.
That's okay. All right. So it originates from the 2014 Farm Bill, and it consolidates the 2 previous easement programs. ALE program is an option that keeps working lands available for our agricultural by protecting the farming uses or protecting grazing uses of grasslands and related conservation value. NRCS provides up to 50% cost share for the purchase of ag land easements. And for our grasslands of special significance is a program option by which we can provide up to 75% of the purchase price of the easement, as long as it meets our GSS eligibility criteria. It requires a match funding from an entity for the remainder of the easement value, and sources for the match can include philanthropic foundation grants, private donations, landowner donation of the land value, and state government grants like the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. So next. So eligibility. What we're going to talk about here is the different types of eligibility. And first we have our entity eligibility, which is land trusts, SWCDs, or other organizations like the Conservation Fund or TNC. We refer to them as entities, and they must be eligible to participate. The entities apply for a 5-year program agreement prior to submitting any parcel applications. So the state office, myself, my supervisor, and a couple other staff review the entity applications for the program agreements. We determine their eligibility, and then we send them off to the state conservationists to be approved. Next. So landowner eligibility. For all of our NRCS programs, landowners have to be eligible by establishing records and updating them with the Farm Service Agency. Each landowner's composition can be an individual, an LLC, a general partnership, and each one of those has a specific eligibility requirement. Landowners, we hope, and they should be eligible at the time of application, but they must be eligible at the time we rank their applications and when we obligate them and at the time of payment. And you would think that would be simple, but it's often not. Things happen through the course of 3 years, and so entities change or landowners change, people come and go, that sort of thing. So it's very important that they all remain eligible. And it is the responsibility of the entity and the landowners and FSA to complete all that eligibility paperwork and keep it up to date. Next. So land, there we go, land eligibility. So now we have an eligible entity and an eligible landowner, and so now we're going to try to make the land eligible, and it can be private or tribal land that's agriculture, such as a farm or ranch. The land must meet one of the following requirements: that it has prime or unique or farmland of statewide important soils. It can contain historical or archaeological resources or artifacts. Enrolling the land would protect grazing uses related to conservation values by restoring and conserving eligible land, or by protecting the land will further a state or local policy consistent with the purposes of our program. The land must meet one of the additional following land uses, which is cropland, rangeland, pasture land, grassland, excuse me, or land that contains forbs or shrublands for which grazing is the predominant use. Can be located in an area that has been historically dominated by grasslands or forbs or shrubs, and could provide habitat for animal or plant populations of significant ecological value. Non-industrial private forest lands that contribute to the economic viability of an offered parcel or serves as a buffer to protect such lands from development. Next. And the next one is going to be our land ineligibility. So right out of the box, sometimes land is ineligible. It could have similar or pre-existing restrictions. It already is subject to an easement or a deed restriction that provides similar restoration or protection. It may have adverse conditions, such as an on-site hazardous materials, or off-site, could be next to a mine or things like that, that would make it ineligible. It could have an unacceptable title or insufficient access. We get this quite a bit, believe it or not, that we have insufficient legal access can be a problem on lands that are isolated or that don't have any access to them, so that can become an issue. Or unacceptable third party rights on which the land has gas, oil, or earth or mineral rights. Exploration has been leased, or the owners by someone other than the landowner, unless NRCS determines that the third party right will not harm or interfere with achieving the ACEP ALE purposes. Ownership, the land is already owned by a federal, state, or local government or non-governmental organization. So other considerations that we look at are forest lands. Forest lands cannot exceed 2/3 of the offered easement. However, we do have an option for the state con to submit a waiver. And then impervious surfaces. So impervious surfaces can't be more than 2% of the offered easement. And again, we have the option for a state con waiver on that as well. So next. We're going to get to our application materials. And so we're going to move on to the next slide. And so the parcel application is how we determine eligibility of the landowner, and we collect information that help us rank the application. The NRCS CPA 41, our ACEP ALE parcel application for each individual fiscal year, and then supplemental documentation that we're going to talk about on the next slides. Apologize for the delay. So here's our CPA 41. It's a national application. It's used by everybody in the country for ACEP ALE. Again, it collects our basic information, the entity, the landowner, the land eligibility. It also collects the costs, whose portion's paying for what. And then it must be signed, certified by the entity and the landowner, and that's at the bottom. So we'll move on to the next slide. And all these are posted to our website, and we can give you a link to that as well. So here's our ACEP ALE parcel application packet. It's specific to Oregon. We put it together, Matt, myself, other colleagues involved with ACEP. It must provide an introduction letter. It has an application checklist that outlines the required supplemental forms and information needed to complete the application. It provides a naming convention for all the required documents, which is required when we upload it to the national database. So they want it in a specific naming convention. It has a questionnaire that consists of 70 to 80 questions that are a mixture of multiple choice and short answer questions. And then it also has an appendices on how to submit the definitions and how the entities must use the web soil survey for their soils maps. So, and next. So in addition to the 41A and the parcel application, the following are required. So we have to have a recorded vested deed that covers the entire proposed parcel easement, evidence of a SAMS registration. We need a title commitment or a preliminary title commitment. We need a written pending offer to purchase the ALE and current entity delegation of authority, a DOA, and a signature authority documents from the entity. GIS shape files of the proposed easement boundary, which includes the maps, again, of the boundary, the access points, the public land survey system, which is your township section range maps, and then they must provide a land cover, whether it's cropland, grasslands, those sort of things. They have to have that as part of it. So, and then we have some required applicable information that are on the next slides, and it's kind of like a checklist. Next slide there, Matt.
Eric,
and that is.
Do you mind taking the
question, Amanda?
Yeah, do you mind taking the next question?
No, we'll take them
okay.
for sure.
Go for it, Amanda. If you're speaking, Amanda, you're on mute. All right. Well, we'll come back to Amanda's question maybe later. So go for it, Eric.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, next slide there, Matt. And these are kind of like a checklist if you have these items. So if you have water rights, if you have mineral rights, if you are looking to cut out sections of your parcel and you have a building envelope that you want out, we want to see those things. So these are the following checklists, and then the optional supplemental is a phase one, the legal boundary survey, and an appraisal report. So these are things that happen as part of and may or may not be with the initial application. So with that, I think we're next slide. And we might be getting to our ranking process so Matt's going to take us the rest of the way and talk about our ranking overview process and our application timelines.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. All right. So everybody can hear me, right? All good?
Yes.
Okay. So about our ranking criteria for ACEP ALE, we use criteria determined both at the NRCS national level and at the NRCS Oregon level to help fund the best applications and really weed out applications that solidly meet the program purposes. So the criteria consists of, like I mentioned, the nationally developed criteria, what we refer to as program criteria, that can add up to a minimum points of 200. And we also have the state developed criteria that we refer to as resource criteria. That can be a maximum of 200 points. So an application can score a total of 400 points. For the state developed criteria, each year, NRCS Oregon reviews and updates the ranking criteria, and we consult with, we start out at the ACEP team staff level, and then we consult with Oregon leadership, and then the State Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of non-NRCS stakeholders as well. And so as an example, in fiscal year 2025, which we're currently in, at the federal level, we established 3 ranking pools. So we have our General Farm Bill, ACEP ALE. We had a new funding source this year, which, as you may know, is currently paused, but we had the Inflation Reduction Act specific criteria developed. And then we also had another pool for those GSS, the Grasslands of Special Environmental Significance applications. And once these criteria are established, the staff, ACEP staff, we work to adapt the criteria into questions that are answered by the entity on the parcel application packet that Eric was mentioning a couple of minutes ago. As per policy, our ranking criteria are publicly available. It's available online each fiscal year on our website, which is linked here. And by policy, we're required to post it 30 days prior to the batching period. And specifically, I included a screenshot here of where our criteria is. If you click this link and scroll down to the webpage, you'll find our General Farm Bill ranking criteria for this year. A little bit deeper dive into the national program criteria. So Taylor and Robin kind of asked us to describe this a bit more, as it may highlight some differences between OAHP and ACEP ALE. In general, our questions are based on a single point of quantitative or qualitative data. So, and each question further is answered as a multiple choice or a Boolean, a yes or no question. And different answers within a question receive different amount of points. So an example of that entire description is one of the questions here from National, which is the decrease in the percentage acreage of farm and ranch land in the county using the last 2 USDA agriculture censuses. And you can see how there's a multiple choice answer, and then each answer is awarded a different amount of points based on the emphasis that National is deciding to put on those answers. Generally, the national criteria center on the following, which includes changes in population growth or density in the county that the application is in, changes in farm and ranch land in the county based on typically the ag census, and the easement's ability to enhance protected land area and ag operations based on proximity to other ag operations or proximity to other protected land. And there is also a focus on historically underserved producers, which is defined in NRCS policy. As for the state criteria, what we refer to as the resource criteria, we also follow policy that generally provides us guidance on what can and cannot be included as criteria as determined by the state. In fiscal year 25 specifically, NRCS Oregon general criteria focused on proximity to incorporated cities and or census designated places. We also include criteria on entity monitoring and performance, which I'll talk about later in a couple slides. We have a couple of geographic priority areas that we include, such as parcels located within an Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Conservation Opportunity Area. We have questions about historical resources if the parcel selects and qualifies for this category. And then we also have questions related to historically underserved producers. So another example here of one of the state specific criteria is a parcel that is partially or wholly within the boundaries of the ODFW COA. And we have a Boolean answer, a yes or no. And so the yes gets awarded points if it is within a boundary. I will jump into the ACEP ALE timeline as well. These slides may be a bit busy, so I'll try to take my time and explain as these terms may be a little wonky as well, so I'll slow down here. But here's the general overview of our timeline without dates attached. We'll start out with the pre-application work. So this is work primarily conducted by the entity with their landowner that they're working with in reviewing if the parcel is a good project, not only for their mission and their goals, but also how it fits in with the ACEP ALE program or other funding programs. Generally, NRCS at this time, we're having some initial conversations with the entity about the parcel, about its eligibility, and providing just some general guidelines and guidance on how to move forward. Then we have our application batching cutoff date. Usually, I'll get to dates in a second, actually. Then we process the application, and if it is eligible and funded, it makes it to what's called obligation. So this is when NRCS attaches funding to the project. That there's no payments made, but there is funding within our budget that is now tied to this specific parcel application. Then we move into the acquisition process, generally a 2 to 3 year process. And within that 2 to 3 years, the closing date can be communicated to NRCS at any point, and that'll start the closing window essentially. And eventually the easement will close and we'll make payments. And from there, the entity will steward and monitor the parcel in perpetuity, forever. And in the next couple slides, we'll talk a bit more about the pre-application work and the application processing. And then I will kind of brush over the acquisition, closing, and stewardship phases. So here's the timeline with some dates attached to it. This is looking into next fiscal year, which starts October 1st, 2025. And we'll walk through this again with some dates. So that pre-application work should be happening now with the entity and the landowners. Ideally, they'll be having some conversations with NRCS staff about the potential application. And then typically each fall, we have our application cutoff date in November. Then through December 2025 through August 2026, NRCS staff are processing the application. And ideally, if it's eligible, we'll get to obligation in August or September of 2026. As I mentioned, the acquisition is about a 2 or 3 year process. So this example is October 2026 through January 29. And anytime the closing date can be communicated to NRCS, but this example has January 2029. And then the closing period occurs from January 29 through March 29. And ideally, the easement will close in March 2029. And then stewardship again continues on forever from there. All right. Dive into a bit of the details related to pre-application work here. And just a reminder, these activities are completed by the entities. So NRCS staff aren't necessarily carrying the torch during each of these steps. But these are steps that we would recommend to entities to carry out in this order. So they would start by, of course, assessing the project with the landowner, doing some outreach, having some initial conversations. If it seems like it would be a good fit, the entity could or should decide to continue conducting due diligence on the property deed and title. And then from the NRCS perspective, just after this, if the entity does not have a program agreement, that 5-year agreement that Eric mentioned, we would recommend that the entity would submit that application for a program agreement at this time before moving on. Because if they're not an eligible entity, then there's probably no reason to continue down the timeline here. After that, they should work with their landowner to establish or update their eligibility forms with the Farm Service Agency. And then from there, probably have some more intimate discussions with NRCS about the application, starting to fill out the application packet and getting their supplemental documentation, such as the maps, started. And eventually they will submit an application in November 2025 for fiscal year 26. Here we'll zoom into application processing in a bit more detail. So that December 25 through September 26 timeline. So once we receive an application, NRCS will, of course, start reviewing it. We'll review the land and landowner eligibility in pretty thorough detail. From there, we will begin conducting our on-site visits. So that's when we conduct our limited phase 1 environmental assessment to check for those potentially adverse on-site or off-site conditions. And we'll continue on with ranking and tentatively selecting our projects for funding. And just after this step, if any projects are either ineligible or we don't have enough funding for certain projects, for example, if it ranked at our lowest ranking position, they will either be deferred or determined ineligible at this time before moving forward onto what's called our pre-obligation internal controls review. So our funded projects will move on, and we work with what I best describe it as, and Eric, correct me, it's kind of a quasi-national level branch, the easement acquisitions branch, because we currently at NRCS Oregon do not have realty specialists on staff. So we work with kind of a quasi-national branch to assist with that title, that due diligence review, but they also review our land and landowner eligibility as well. So once the easement acquisitions branch also finds the parcel to be eligible, those projects will continue on to be submitted to national for a full internal controls review. And then from there, the parcel contract will ideally be obligated and executed. So it'll be signed by our state conservationist. And again, this is when the funding gets attached, but there's no payments made, but the funding will be tied to this project. And then just to quickly kind of brush over acquisition, closing, and stewardship, this is that longer 2 to 3 year window. We do have extensions available as well as you all were just talking about extensions. We do process extensions as well. And in this time period, the required items to acquire close easement include the easement deed, clear title needs to be secured, and appraisal. We also collect a baseline environmental report, and then the entity also must submit a payment package to NRCS, basically confirming the funding available for the easement. And once it's all closed, the entity must continue to monitor and submit a report annually to NRCS. And that form is available on our webpage. It's pretty simple, and we send out monitoring reminders each year as well. And thank you very much. Eric, if you have anything else to add here, but this is our contact information. We also probably should have put on Greg Becker, who is our state conservationist. But this is kind of the staff at NRCS Oregon that work on the ACEP program.
For the day-to-day.
For the day-to-day, yeah.
Looks like Mark has a question.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Eric and Matt. That's a very interesting presentation. Can you give me a perspective? I'm not as familiar with the program as I probably should be, but in Oregon, how many easements have been funded over the last few years? I mean, what's the track record of these easements in Oregon?
So I started in 22, and we've got one that has been funded since then. And I'm just talking ALEs, but prior to that, my predecessor had a number of grasslands of special significance in eastern Oregon, like the Zumwalt Prairie and some other areas like that. So a little bit, pretty much everything 2018 on. I think I guess we'd say we're in about a half dozen right now. But we have a lot of them, obviously, in that 3 year window since I've taken over. It really ramped up in 2022,
Okay.
and it hasn't really slowed down at that point. So there was just pretty much a shift at that point when we started seeing a lot of, and it was probably due to the OAHP program.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Any others? Well, thank you for
Can I ask
your
a quick question,
time.
actually?
Sorry, and Sarah has hers
Sure.
up too. It's
Okay.
just hiding in the.
Oh yeah, it was same color as
It's
the
not
wall.
yellow.
Hides in the wall.
So Dan, go for it, and then Sarah.
Yeah, sorry. So this is a little bit more maybe in the weeds, but I noticed that you measure the I guess development pressure criteria based on the last two censuses, and the census numbers can kind of jump around a lot from year to year in a way that doesn't always match reality, and response rates are going down and so on and so forth. So I was just wondering if you take that into consideration or ever bring in other kind of more objective sources like the NRI or land cover type data.
We can bring the NRI into state program questions, but the questions that you were talking about with NAS, the ag statistics, and those come from national, and we have no say on those questions. But like you mentioned, the range inventory information or things like that, if that's what you're thinking of as NRI, then yeah, we certainly can do that as our state program questions.
Okay.
And we review them every year and really look for input at the State Technical Advisory Committee. That's where we present. After we put together our information, we present it to the State Technical Advisory Committee. Usually that's in June, and that gives us several months to take those questions, comments, and then rework our ranking applications if we need to.
Right. And if I could just follow up on that real quick, so in Oregon in particular, and in other places, there's been a little bit of a push to look at the idea of valuing easements based on not what the landowner's giving up in the sense of like the ability to develop their land, but actually directly valuing its conservation benefits. And it sounds like none of the criteria you have would preclude those from being considered for NRCS funding, but they may not rank particularly high. In other words, the way the values are come up with don't factor into your calculus at all.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, a lot of people look at the conservation value as higher than development value. However, this kind of pains me to say, but we're only given a certain amount of allocation funds at the beginning of the fiscal year. And then we have to do what we call a funds request to national. And when we do a funds request, national then looks at each individual application, it looks at the ranking, and then it determines whether or not they're going to fund our application, give us extra funds. So we take that into consideration. And so if we have an application that ranks below a 90, let's say, and we're asking national to fund it, it's just dead on arrival.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Sarah, you want to go with your question?
And someone else, Sarah had a question.
Yeah, I kind of have two. One is on the ranking criteria, and this kind of follows up to what Dan was saying. You guys have for under the Oregon criteria, proximity to incorporated cities. Can you just expand a little bit on how that works for you guys? Or how that's ranked?
So what we're doing now is using the urban growth boundary and from the state and trying to incorporate that as in next to within I think it's a mile, 3 miles, and then anything after that. That's kind of what we're doing right now. We're using the current urban growth boundary. That was an application that when Matt came, or a application question, ranking question that when Matt came on board, we started to look at it and we teased that out because before we really didn't have that question. And so that's what we're using as our criteria. It's the urban growth boundaries.
Cool.
And
Thank
municipals.
And I see Ed has his hand up.
I do. Yeah, thanks, Eric, for the presentation. Since we looked at the board or the commission agenda and, looking at potentially selecting projects in February for funding through Oregon Ag Heritage Program, and these programs with ALE are very much intertwined, as we've seen with the last few rounds of projects. Would you, by February of any given year, have gone through that initial eligibility review, land eligibility on the applications that you guys are getting? Would there be, I guess, are we pretty comfortable that we can avoid a situation where something that's not eligible for NRCS isn't getting selected and funded through the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, and then it's kind of like we did a bunch of work for proposal that's going to have to shift in its funding makeup, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, we're given a strict timeline by national to work through EAB and how they work. So we can't submit our applications to the easement acquisition branch without all eligibility being completed, and we can't ask for any additional funds without having all of the eligibility completed. And so our first funds assessment was February 7th, which was just last Friday. If I'm less time flying, but it was just a Friday or so ago. So that answer, I mean, we have to have everything done pretty much in February as far as eligibility is concerned on our FY26 applications. They all had to be eligible and submitted by February 7th.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds like it
Yes, no?
aligns
Off bounds?
pretty well.
Okay. Any others? Again, I really appreciate the time you gave us to give us, if we can give you an overview of the ACEP program, ACEP ALE, and our contact information is on the PDF that we submitted to Robin and Taylor. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, further questions. So thank you.
Thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it. And like Eric mentioned, they
Welcome.
had shared their presentation with us today, so we went ahead and posted that on this meeting's web page, so you can access it there, and I can follow up with the email to the commission so everybody has the slides that they presented. And just a reminder that the goal of this presentation, in addition to just general education for the commission and us as staff, honestly, about the program, is to help tee up our conversation around program refinements at our next commission meeting, so that one of the areas we're always trying to improve is increasing our alignment with match funders. And like we mentioned at the top, ACEP ALE is the most frequent and largest dollar amount match funder we've had to date in the program, and we expect it will likely continue to be so. So it's just a useful context for all of us to have as we think about how we tweak this program to make it work better for those who are actually using the dollars to get projects on the ground. So with that, before we close this item, I just want to see if in addition to questions for Eric and Matt, are there just general thoughts the commission has for us as staff as we go, kind of leave this meeting and prep for our next meeting, bringing program refinements back to the commission as to things we ought to look into as far as aligning with ACEP ALE, given the presentation we just had? Anything bubbling up for folks? And if not, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure we had a chance, and you can always follow up via email as well. Amanda, go for it.
My earlier raised hand was a technical difficulty.
Okay.
But I saw the criteria point about proximity, and apologies if I missed your earlier explanation for it. But when we're talking about program alignment between OAHP and ACEP, and if NRCS has a requirement or ranking based on proximity to urban centers, and we've talked in the past about making sure we're not heavy-handed on either side of the state with what projects we're awarding. So just trying to clarify that one idea isn't in conflict with the other between those two programs.
It's a great question, because we all know that the Willamette Valley and urban growth boundaries points are a lot more likely to land in one of those. Well, it's just where we're at, and honestly, trying to protect those lands, to me, maybe I shouldn't say to me, but those are more valuable. We currently have an application that adjoins an urban city boundary, and so it's really worth protecting that ground. So in Eastern Oregon, they don't earn as many points as that, but oftentimes there is a threatened and endangered species or grasslands or things like that would give that application more points. So when we see that, we do see the population density questions that the national gives us hurt our Eastern Oregon applicants a little more than they would our Willamette Valley applicants, but it's just such the diverseness of Oregon.
And I guess
I'd rather leave it in than take.
yeah, my follow-up then is, what is the relative weight of that priority point to the entire application package? Is it actually hurting the applicants, or is it being made up by like T&E species and other resource concerns, like you're saying?
It is. The only one that I think is an actual adjacent question that gives points that are adjacent, that are a little bit more than, say, within a mile or 2 miles or within 5 or more than 5. So it's the adjacent that gets the most points. But that's the same for our T&E species or some of our areas of opportunity. Or if, see, in Eastern Oregon, one of the questions is, are you adjacent to a piece of ground that's already protected? And that could be BLM or forest or those things, which happens quite often. And those get higher ranked if they're adjacent. So it does work itself out.
Robin,
that answer your question, Amanda?
I was just going to build off of what I think similar to what Amanda was asking. But Matt or Eric, can you off the top of your head tell us how many points are available total? And then remind us, like, I think it's 15 points is the total for that a project could get in the proximity to an urban growth boundary or municipal. I might be off on that one, but total and then
Matt might have it off his head because his memory is phenomenal. I would have to dig through a current ranking sheet. So, okay. Matt, do you happen to have the answer to?
I'd probably also have to dig, but I would, yeah, I'd probably also have to dig, but it depends. So the weighting also depends on the pool. So, for example, how I mentioned, we have the General Farm Bill, we have the Inflation Reduction Act pool, and we have the GSS pool. The weights, AKA the points associated with each answer, can change by each pool. So that same question, the proximity to a incorporated city or a census designated place, I believe it actually has different points between the IRA pool, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the general pool. So it just depends on what the priority, because the Inflation Reduction Act has a heavier emphasis on development threat. So we were able to award that a higher amount of points, if that adds any context. But yeah, and just to echo Eric, I would agree that our criteria around conservation areas, T&E species does balance out some of that development pressure. And hence why we also wanted to include the census designated places, because there's incorporated cities doesn't capture all of the population growth or recorded population growth in the state. And another example in Eastern Oregon is the SageCon landscape planning tool. So if a parcel falls within a SageCon priority area, it will be awarded points as well. So just throwing out more examples, I guess.
Sarah?
Just one more, maybe hopefully quick one. It might require follow-up, but I'm just wondering about the overlap in program, people taking advantages of both programs. So do you guys know off the top of your head how many entities are eligible, have gone through submitting the application and getting it signed in Oregon? Is it a lot? Not many?
Not many. No, that I can find fairly quick.
Okay, you can email it. I just wondering.
1, 2, 3, 6, 7.
As in entities that participate in ACEP ALE, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the entities that have been determined eligible.
10.
10? Okay.
10. And some we have that have a 5-year program and they've never applied. They've never had a parcel application. I did just look at one and like, oh yeah, that's right. They've never had an application, but they're eligible. So, and I think it was trying to remember who asked me a question about how many we've had. It wasn't Mark. And again, we're really, I mean, since 2018, it was Dan. So we really haven't gotten our feet underneath us yet as far as doing this, but the workload is immense when you're trying to talk about purchasing land with the federal government. If you just put it in that context of trying to buy real estate, it's a lot of work. And since 2014, and then again, a revamp of it in 2018, I know other states get as many as 40 applications or more. But they already have a team of partners and things like that. But I can kind of compare a little bit with our WRE program that's been around since 99, and we have 167 WREs in the state. So I think that this program is just going to continue to build. Back to you, Taylor.
Okay, well, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And I think with that, Doug, I'll turn it back to you for final thoughts or let's close out here.
My only final thought is that is why our program was developed back in 2017, was to take more advantage of these ACEP AL funds, because Oregon, certainly at that point in time, and it probably hasn't changed a lot, but we were getting virtually none of the nationwide funds on ACEP AL. And so with our Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, we are attempting to turn that around and get our fair share of that federal funding. So yeah, with all that being said, I think we've covered everything we needed to cover today, unless somebody's got some additional questions or issues that they wanted to talk about. Hearing and seeing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.